Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Arsenal Pass. Today we have a Dromai deck tech with Ian, I think better known as IanTCG, one of my favorite players on the pro circuit. Did have the pleasure of casting one of your matches at Pro Tour Baltimore. I genuinely thought that you were at a win and in for top eight. Both Brian Gottlieb and I thought that. That's why we had your match on stream. So that ninth was pretty soul crushing for me as well. I was like, okay, he's definitely
Yeah.
in. We're gonna see a third Dromai. But yeah, basically TLDR on that. You went to Pro Tour Baltimore, performed really well. Unfortunately, did get ninth, but we got to see on stream particularly a masterclass of Dromai into that Oldhim matchup, which I was particularly impressed with, and that's the deck we're going to be looking at today. Just want to ask you a few questions about Dromai. The history of Dromai is kind of interesting because it's a deck that I think that has gone under the radar for a long time, is a bit hated on by some vocal group of people in Flesh and Blood, and I think notoriously has a very bad conversion rate on the aggregate, right? That is just absolutely not the case for a certain number of players who have taken this deck to top finishes consistently and have shown mastery over the deck. Why do you think it is that Dromai, despite now being a popular hero sort of in the general populace's hands, is having that bad conversion rate? Do you think that people are building the deck wrong? Are they playing the deck wrong? Or some other fundamental issue?
It's very hard to say because, I feel like Dromai is not that strong if you know how to play against her.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some people that are just very good at playing against, so like outplaying her, and then you have to go like a level further than that to outplay their outplays.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really weird situation, and you really need to know again what kind of game plan you're supposed to have into what matchups and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a very technical deck and a deck that really sort of puts it forward that you need to have a game plan in terms of how to win, especially against these more grindy matchups like Ultim. I think in the finals we saw, Michael Fang pick apart, not in the finals, but in the top eight, pick apart his Dromai opponent in the form of Yuha, but then circling back, it's like there was potentially ways for Yuha to win that game if Yuha had potentially changed his early game strategy, use the Tumultai differently, play the Remembrances differently. It's very, very technical because I remember my post-mortem after that match was sort of, okay, Michael Fang had that locked. There was no way that Yuha could win just based off the pitch stack, based off the poppers, etc. But had people talk to me after, and there's just so many layers to Dromai, which makes it super interesting. But you're totally right. There's people that can outplay you, right? They can maybe counter your ghostly touch strategy, counter this sort of predictable endgame. But you, as a Dromai player, can go another layer deep and counter their strategy to try and beat you. What made you play Dromai at the Pro Tour?
So first of all, I just really enjoy playing an Illusionist. I've been playing Prism for a long time, and when Prism got banned, I basically went over to Dromai and Icelander for a bit. And yeah, second, I thought Dromai was just in a really good position.
Mm-hmm.
Lexi, I was expecting basically Lexi, Oldhim, Dromai, and Azalea pretty much. And I felt like I could get a pretty favorable matchup into all of them by just tweaking my deck a little bit and making it so that, that it wins.
Mm-hmm. So you felt like it was a meta pick for the Pro Tour specifically. What did anything happen to the Pro Tour that you didn't expect, or did the meta sort of play out exactly how you did with Lexi being the most popular deck, and Oldhim not being as popular as maybe we had expected, but still performing very well in the hands of the eventual Pro Tour champion? Was that sort of the meta that you were predicting when you picked up this list?
Yeah, pretty much. I expected there to be a bit more Azalea because of the Battle Hardened results, but everyone kind of pivoted to Lexi. They started learning Lexi. Lexi got very hard to play against certain deck lists, even as Dromai. So that was a little bit scary for me. But for the rest, yeah. Also, I was afraid of Anathos Oldhim.
Yeah.
Because that was a very novel thing at that time. Still is, I think. And I didn't have enough practice against it. But for the rest, yeah, it was pretty much as I expected.
What do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of Dromai? And we can even sort of hone that into your particular Dromai list in that meta. Because Dromai is one of these polarizing heroes where we talk about these 90-90 matchups where both sides of the matchup think that it's almost unlosable. You know, the Oldhams think they can beat Dromai, the Dromais think they can beat Oldham. Where do you think the strengths are? Are you fundamentally favored into decks like Oldham with this list? Are you strong into decks like Lexi? Like, what are the potential weaknesses of this deck outside of what you mentioned being potentially Anathos Oldham?
So for example, Lexi isn't as favored as you might or might not think. Um, what I really noticed when playing against Lexi is that like it's really hard to find a spot where you can actually develop a dragon and then also get to attack with the dragon without like fearing getting popped, because like a pop is just, it loses you all the tempo and like you throw everything away basically at once. So I had to find a playstyle to kind of play around that, and it's very hard. Um, like fatiguing also isn't. It works sometimes, but if their deck is built properly, it doesn't really work. Um, yeah, Anathos Oldham is like a deck that can both play aggro and play control in the matchup, and gets a leak a lot of damage because of the fan base being just being annoying.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go ahead and hop into the list here. So to start off, let's go ahead and talk about the equipment just from the top here. There's a particular few pieces of equipment I want you to expand upon. First off, Ghostly Touch, then Mage Master Boots, Seeker's Leggings, and then the Wave of Reality. I know Ghostly Touch is generally used for the end game that a lot of people will be familiar with Dromai, stacking up those counters, creating the passing mirages, coming in with maybe multiple swings of that Ghostly Touch. Is there anything in addition to that, or is that going to be your primary end game plan against a deck like Oldham, or do you have multiple game plans and that is just one of them?
It's one of the biggest ones at the very least, because like another one is just pray that they end up with a zero popper hand. That happens. It's not a game plan you can rely on, but it definitely happens, as you could have seen in round 14. Another one is actually grinding them out of poppers. So, for example, by having an OVS stick around on board a lot, they're going to be forced to pop Ash Wings continuously. And maybe if you manage to get like a Dromai Miragai thing next to it, it's very annoying because you force them to pop 2 Ash Wings every turn and then somehow swing back. There's also Burn Them All as a potential win con. If you somehow manage to blow up their crown and all of their no rune, you can just kill them with Arcane sometimes. But most of the times it just ends up being like you just finish them off with, you just get them low with like all of those smaller strategies and then finish them off with a big spooky fist.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the Mage Master Boots is generally used for Tome of Fyendal turns and to potentially play something like 2 passing mirages on a single turn.
2 passing mirages almost barely happens, to be honest. It's mostly like just play the passing mirage with go again and then hit them with the Ghostly Touch. But for the rest, yeah.
What about the Seeker's equipment? I know that Seeker's equipment is kind of there's a duality of thought in terms of if you should play Seekers or if not in Dromai. What is the use case for it in this list?
So Seekers has been quite one of my own inventions, kind of. Just a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to play Vembris to create Ash in Dromai, and I suddenly got to the realization that like, wait, I can just use Seekers to get my turn 0 Ash, and that's like a huge deal for Dromai. It's like so much tempo that like the amount of games where you have to throw away your first turn just to generate Ash, it's just huge. It's like an entire turn just changes the entire pace of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So most of the times it's just used on turn 0 or turn 1.
What about the Wave of Reality? What is that used for?
Wave of Reality seems, it's kind of an unassuming card, but we use it mostly for the Lexi matchup. So we use the Seeker's Leggings and the Wave of Reality so that we can first get a lot of tempo by having that Ash on turn 0, which is really huge against them. You get to start developing dragons starting turn 1. And Wave of Reality just makes it so that you get to block the breakpoints very well. So it usually blocks for like 6 in total, because you line up your ward with D-React on their infection shot, blocking 1 plus the blood rot, and then maybe a searing shot with 3 block, blocking like a 5 in total with a spectral shield afterward.
Yeah,
So
stopping those key on-hit triggers, definitely. Yeah. Well, looking at the main deck here, let's take it from the top. Talk to me about the ratios. I know, looking at Mara Ferris's list, she in particular had, I think, more reds. In general, you do have access to 3 Remembrance. I know some Dromais had access to 2 Remembrance, but 3 Remembrance as your yellows, plus 2 Temefjandal, 3 Ember Moss Centipines as blues, 3 Passing Mirage, 1 Time Snap, and 3 Sweeping Blow. Talk to me sort of about the ratios of this deck and why you have as many blues as you do.
So one of the strengths of this deck is basically the big dragons, and that is Dominia, Tumulti, and in a way Vincerica and Necria. But the biggest parts are Tumulti and Dominia. Tumulti is very big against Lexi and Oldhim, especially. So Tumulti is basically one of your win cons against Oldhim. I'm not too sure how Mara happens to what Mara's game plan is against Oldhim, but it feels like it's a lot harder without Tumulti than with. And Lexi somehow just falls apart if she doesn't have her New Horizon. So if you manage to get to set it up, it's just smooth sailing, hopefully.
Pretty good. Yeah, so in regards to Tumulti, we talked about it as sort of being a win con against Oldhim. When playing Tumulti against Oldhim, are you generally hitting the Crown of Seeds or are you hitting the Null Rune Boots first?
It depends, but 90% of the time I go for Crown of Seeds. This is just to make it harder, to make it easier for the Oldhim to make mistakes. Sometimes they end up arsenaling a blue, and it becomes very hard for them to play after they do that. And even if you're not taking the mistakes into account, just making them forcing them to play like all of their cards or keeping a card extra in hand is already annoying enough for them. So that's why it's Crown of Seeds over No Room for Me. And it's also the blind pitch stacking that's you can start tracking that pitch a little bit if there's no crown. If there is, it's really hard.
And another win condition with this deck, I assume, is burn them all. Can you talk to me about how you utilize that card in this list in general and maybe against those longer fatigue-oriented matchups like Oldhim?
So in general, burn them all is just it's just a very good card. It's a 3 block. Let's go again for 0 cost. So it activates the go again on all your dragons. Against Lexi, I actually use it a lot. Because you can just block with 3 cards, then hit them with your entire board with dragons, and also slowly get to stack up the 1 arcane damage every turn. So over time, it will deal like 6 damage in total. It also banishes your attack actions in case they want to Codex of Frailty you. Granted, we do have 6 blue attack actions that we can never banish, so if one of those is in your grave, it doesn't matter. But sometimes it matters. And versus Oldhim specifically, it's like it forces them to either leak damage or to lose another card. I usually use it after I destroyed Crown of Seeds, because it's a lot less efficient for them to start blocking the arcane then. They need to pitch a blue. They can prevent the 1 arcane. They can use 1 resource for the shield, but don't get the free cycle with the Crown of Seeds, which is really big. So usually the game flow is like you generate Ash, you go wide on board with Ash Wings, then you play Tumulti, you destroy the Crown of Seeds, and then you start pressuring them with Burn Them All.
Makes sense.
And yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the defensive package in this deck? I'm not sure if this is very standard for Dromai lists. I know some of the lists I saw definitely did not have quite an extensive defensive package of the list, but you have 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Oasis or Spy, 2 Sand Cover, 3 Sink Below, 3 Sigil of Solace, and 2 Unmovable in the deck. What's sort of the thesis behind that robust of a defensive package?
Um, it's mostly to solidify the Oldhim matchup. Um, Pretty much all of the DRX go in against Oldhim. It also is good against Azalea.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a decently good matchup overall, but being able to cover dominates and such makes it so that pretty much all the Pauper matchups and Azalea become very good. And those are actually one of your biggest fears. Ninja and Droomblade were a little bit low profile for Pro Tour, so we just kind of hope to get through that.
Mm-hmm.
And against Lexi, you can see that 2 cent covers are also going in. Those are just also, they help a lot with survivability in that matchup.
Mm-hmm. For this deck's sort of general game plan and how it tries to win games, I know it's very dynamic and it depends matchup to matchup, but what are some key dragons you're really looking to get out early across most matchups?
Recently, I've actually been liking Yenderai a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not one of the dragons you'd expect, probably, but for some reason, it's very hard for Rangers to remove Yenderai. And I just really like developing a Yenderai, placing a passing rush next to it, and just saying like, okay, I block with my whole hand, and I hit you for 3, no Phantasm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very satisfying to me. But that's the thing for Rangers, basically. Yeah, for Oldhim, it's mostly just developing a lot of Ashwings and then comboing with Miragai.
Mm-hmm.
And against most, yeah. Yeah. Overall, Yenderai is just a pretty safe card to develop. It's because it's very hard to remove for them.
Yeah, I think notably against some of the Oldhim matchups in particular, we see the power of of the mirror guys and the chromais when there is a critical mass of Ashwings on the board just becomes very hard for them to deal with. It seems like drawing the Rake the Embers early in the matchup, or at least in close proximity of each other, can put the Oldhim in a pretty tough spot at some point in the game. Talk to me about the 3 Remembrance. I saw multiple Dromai decks at the Pro Tour opt to play 2 Remembrance. Do you think it's imperative to play 3 in a deck like this and to beat Oldhim?
Imperative, not specifically, but it does make the game plan a lot more straightforward and more easy, especially in very long, dragged out games. You expect to reach overtime almost, and you would think that Remembrance would make the game longer, but by basically like removing your limits and being able to say like, okay, yeah, you can just play out your mirror guys without thinking, it saves a lot of time in that sense. And it saves a lot of brain power as well.
Yeah. What are some key tips and sort of, I don't know, heuristics for success with the deck that you think some players might not immediately realize when picking up the deck for the first time?
The biggest thing is it's often not correct to play the fun thing. So for example, if you have a big Tumultai hand, against like a Briar or something, it's often not worth it to take like 18 damage to play the Tumultai out. And there's a lot of these kinds of plays that are like, oh yeah, you could do this, but you take a lot of risk in doing this, and it's really you have to be disciplined. don't take unnecessary risk. You might win without taking them.
Yeah. Just I think that's sort of the like a general guide to Flesh and Blood is general is sorry, in general, it's a lot of me saying that word, but you want to take the highest value play and sometimes not the shiniest play or the most attractive play, which might be taking a lot of damage from an opposing aggro deck to play out of Tumultai and take a piece of equipment. But yeah, I think especially with Dromai, just staying strict to your game plan, understanding your role in the matchup is critical to winning. To winning against a lot of these decks. Looking towards the future, the meta landscape is going to change as we head into Road to Nationals, we head into some of these callings or just higher tier events, and then of course, moving into Worlds, which is much later, or Nationals probably, which is a sooner event. How do you think that this deck's position in the meta changes, and what cards do you think you might be subbing in and out?
So currently I'm slightly afraid of seeing more Katsus, and maybe Kodachi Faiz, because I've also seen that top in a recent RTN. One of the things I'm currently considering is adding a second Seeker's equipment, so that would be Seeker's Mitts, to combine with Mage Master Boots, so that you have Seeker's Mitts, Mage Master Boots, and Tome in those matchups, or even double Seekers into, for example, the Dromai Mirror is also going to be huge, or double Seekers into Katsu, so that you can always keep one Seekers back for whenever they breaking skills you. That's one of the ideas I've been playing with a little bit. I've been playing around with Footsteps into Lexi a little bit, so that you can generate Ash while you're blocking their force. Yeah, I've mostly been playing around with the equipment slots. I haven't really been feeling the need to change anything else so far.
Do you think the meta, looking forward in a couple of weeks or even at this upcoming calling is going to be more hostile towards this Dromai deck than the Pro Tour, or do you think the meta is going to be in a better position for a deck like this to succeed?
Dromai always has a problem with metas that are too wide, I think. It's not so easy to have a consistent win rate against everything, but she can have a consistent win rate against most things. So, for example, back when Fi was one of the biggest decks, when it was like Fi, Oldhim, Icelander, it was kind of doable to make a deck that can beat Fi at least or around 50% of the times. But not if, but the current configuration probably wouldn't be able to. It probably has like a 30-40% win rate against it. Maybe lower depending on the pilot, of course.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to ask, and I think it's important as Dromai, comes off of its PT performance and becomes a more popular deck just in general. How does this list do specifically into the mirror? I know the mirror is that's kind of an open-ended question because there's a lot of different Dromai decks floating around. But let's take two of the most popular decks. So into Yuha's deck or into Mara's deck, two kind of different Dromai decks. How do you feel about this list into those matchups specifically?
So one of the biggest difference in between my list and Yuha's list is the third remembrance, and I think that's going to be going to be playing a big role in that matchup, because it basically means that I have access to 12 Rake the Embers, and he only has access to 9 of them, and that's a huge difference maker. It means I can basically compress my deck with more Rake the Embers earlier than he can. And if he can't out my board, I should basically be winning the matchup. Regarding Empress, I haven't tested against it much yet, so I'm not too sure about it. But I have tried playing it into a copy of my deck, and Empress, I managed to get a lot of advantage playing Empress. So I could see how that deck wins in that matchup. But I'll have to test it myself to be sure.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, Ian, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to have players like yourself, specialists in these specific heroes, off of great performances like you had at the Pro Tour, come and talk to us about the decks that you played. For those listening, what are you up to any projects right now, and just ultimately where can they find you?
Um, I'm currently not specifically doing much. I might, yeah, I'm currently working on a deck list for the calling. It'll be in 3 days as of this recording. So maybe you'll see me on stream there.
Yeah. And what about where to find you? Twitter is not the best place.
Yep, Twitter at IanTCG _ Ian. That would probably be the best place for me. You can check out our former Flesh and Blood store, IanTCG.com. We currently don't sell Flesh and Blood anymore because we were in the local brick and mortar, but we still sell other trading card games such as White Schwartz, Final Fantasy TCG, and yeah, some other newer games.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. For those interested, Ian has written an additional sideboard guide and guide with decks and tips on how to pick up the deck, be successful with it, up on the Arsenal Pass Patreon. So check that out if you're not already a member. That'll be coming as soon as this video is dropped. Ian, thank you so much again, and good luck in the calling in the next 3 days.
Yep. Thanks for having me here, man.
Cheers.